Hi, my name is Dan Zeilinger, and I have been a world-traveling trad jazz musician for the past 40 years. Some of my most memorable performances were on the lawn of the Edinburgh Castle, at Imperial Palace in Japan, as well as TV shows and commercials around the world. I've met many people during my career, and have spent many hours on stage on and off with these musicians talking about jazz, life, and more. Some are touring musicians, some are theme park warriors, and some are casual musicians who play on weekends with their friends. I think they all have stories worthy of a movie script. And through these interviews, I'll be sharing them with you.
Hi, this is Dan Zeilinger with Trad Jazz Today. In full disclosure, I have not met my next guest. He's a banjo player. We have many friends adjacent and musical career paths that have run next to each other in some very strange ways. And I'm looking really forward to finding out more about Mr. Steve Peterson. Hi, Steve.
Hey, Dan.
Yeah. So have you seen some of my interviews from earlier programs?
I have. I've watched a lot of them and really enjoyed learning more about some of the people that we both know.
Oh, good. The only reason I asked was if you understand the format. Every so often, I'll get somebody who I interview who hasn't seen the show, and they want to know if I'm going to be grilling them or if there's exactly how deep I'm going to be delving into their past. And I try to do a lot of research. And I thank you, by the way, for sending a bio along, although I had already done the research.
Oh, really?
And quite intriguing. So where were you born, sir?
I was born in 1957 in San Jose, California.
Oh, okay. And that's what I had surmised. Yep, that's what it says. But your profile says you're in Mexico. You know that.
Well, I did spend all of 2019 in Mexico, traveling around as a digital nomad. But other than that 1 year, I've really been spending a lot of time in California and Oregon.
Very cool. But I'm curious, what were you doing for an hour roaming around Jalisco?
What was I doing in Mexico?
Just asking.
Well, I was just traveling around. It was like a year-long vacation. I went to Cabo San Lucas and lived there for 4 months. And then I went up to La Paz, lived there for 7 months, and then spent the rest of the year in Mazatlan and Puerto Vallarta.
Wow. So you stay pretty close to the tourist hubs.
Oh, yeah. I think outside the tourist hubs could be a little dangerous, but
it's true.
Around the tourist clubs, hubs, it's just safe as can be, really.
As long as you like chiclets and you're in a good case. Yeah, I actually had done quite a few cruises down along those cities. The only reason I know that. So let's get right to this here. So you went to San Jose High School?
Well, I went to Peterson High School, if you can believe it. I used to tease people that my grandmother started the school. But after being born in San Jose, I grew up in Santa Clara and Sunnyvale and went to Peterson High School.
Wow. Considering the amount of time I spent in that neighborhood with Ed Zimbrick.
Yeah.
I'm surprised we didn't run into each other before now. But that's cool. Now, let's get to the things. You played for a while with Don Neely.
Well, yeah. I mean, at the time, back in 1975, I went to San Jose State University.
Right.
I was a physics major. I wanted to be an astronomer.
You played with
used to spend a lot of time in the music department just walking around and enjoying the vibe. And one day I saw a flyer up on the wall that said there was a new band that was starting and they needed a variety of instruments, including a banjo. So I auditioned for the job and got it and was playing banjo for Don Neely with the Royal Society Jazz Orchestra.
So you actually started playing banjo much earlier than that. You talked about it in your bio about how seeing the banjo band is what really got your interest.
Yeah, I mean, in 1973, I was really looking around for some sort of a musical instrument to become notable on. And I didn't really want to play guitar or other wind instruments. Everybody seemed to play those. But I did stumble into watching the Peninsula Banjo Band. And when I saw the banjoists, I just thought, wow, these are the coolest musicians ever. So I really decided I had to be like these guys.
There's a clue. You see a banjo band and say, wow. That's cool. There's a clue. That's a good clue. Now, one of the things that you may not know is I actually had a chance to play a few gigs with Scotty Plummer.
Is that right? Wow.
And I saw that he was an influence. I saw the picture of you on stage with him. And I said, wow, that's kind of cool. Yeah, he was a Southern California guy.
Yeah.
And what a great person. And what a tragic death, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately.
But and then the other thing is I spent way too much time with Brad Roth.
Well, yeah, of course. One of the best bands ever, Banjo Mania.
And he, of course, I guess was an influence on you also, eh?
Yeah, when I was 16 years old, I started playing the banjo. I went to my first banjo show and saw Scotty Plummer. I couldn't believe it. And then after my second banjo show, when Brad Roth came bouncing out, the kid must have been 13 or 14 years old. Wow, I couldn't believe it. I had to learn to play like him. I was really impressed.
Wow. Pardon me for smiling so much. It's just, as a wind instrumentalist, and you understand, I spent a lot of time defending banjos and banjo players. I actually drew a cartoon for Flyga once that showed a banjo player standing in front of a Porsche. And he says, well, yes, it is my car. Why do you ask?
Yeah, of course. Not a big money-making business.
Well, that was a Johnny Carson joke.
Yeah.
That made the national headlines with banjo players anyway. And so that's kind of a cool thing. I'm losing my train of thought. Pardon me for looking at my notes. So you tried piano first.
Well, when I was a kid, my mother was a piano teacher, so she was always encouraging me to play music. So, I played piano for a year, violin for a year, saxophone for a year, noodled around on the guitar and the drums, and just never really was interested in enough to practice. So pretty soon that just all went by the wayside, and I just went off and played like the other kids, baseball and swimming and that sort of thing.
One of the things I noticed from watching your videos, by the way, is that you were very interested. This is going to sound funny coming from an entertainer. You're very interested in entertaining, in playing for the crowd. You play familiar songs that are easily accessible to a non-musician audience, and although that may sound funny to people watching this video, that's not all that common with good players.
Well, I appreciate you noticing that. It's true. I notice a lot of banjo players want to do, over-the-top improvisation and maybe play very obscure songs. But I've always just liked the, traditional jazz standards, good pop songs from the 20s, 30s, and 40s. And I like players that play those. So I've always emulated myself to do that sort of thing.
It's interesting that it's kind of a golden time for banjo players again, because between people like Steve Martin playing 5-string and Bella Fleck and some of the people that have come to the forefront recently, banjo has become a cool instrument once again.
Very much so, especially on the 5-string bluegrass country kind of thing. And along with the ukulele, these are really becoming popular. So hopefully in the not too distant future, we'll see the same sort of resurgence on a 4-string banjo, which would be really cool.
Yeah, well, pardon me for relating personal stories, but one of the things I think you'd enjoy hearing is when I was with Banjo Mania, Doug used to bring all of his stuff with him. He'd have a 5-string and a plectrum and a tenor, and he'd bring them all on stage. And finally, a lady from the audience walked up to him and said, well, so why are you bringing all these instruments? And he said, well, because they're different. There's a plectrum is like what Eddie Peabody played, and the tenor is like Harry Reeser, and the 5-string over here is like, and she said, well, aren't they all just banjos?
Oh, jeez.
That's a public perception.
Yes, people don't really understand it. They just think one banjo is one banjo, and they don't know the difference between country western or bluegrass or 4-string or tenor or plectrum.
And that's what my banjo that altered the one with lock tuners, where he can pull a 5th string back and play it like a plectrum, or he can do things, and he only had to show up on the gig with one banjo. So then what I'm saying is, although 5-string is the instrument that has made banjos cool again, I don't think the general public has any idea
They really don't. And, Doug does such a good job. I've known Doug for so many years, and he's really, truly the master of all the different styles of banjo. And he's a great comedian and entertainer at the same time. He's a very impressive guy.
And he's got that southern drawl that just brings you in when he performs. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
But you talk about other people too. I've seen, I do kind of creepy deep dives on my interviews, and one banjo player that you were sitting in with at some point in time was John Chessel. I don't know if that name rings a bell with you.
Oh yeah, I know John. I've known John since the '70s. In fact, I think there's some pictures on my Facebook page with me and him and Dave Marty and a few other people jamming in the courtyard of Sacramento way back when in probably the early '80s, when they used to have the Dixieland jazz festivals there.
Well, actually, John was actually the first banjo player with the Misbehaving Jazz Band.
Oh, really? Wow.
The first year we played Sacramento, he was the banjo player. And
yes.
he used to break a string of tune. It was amazing. But,
yes.
I haven't heard anybody talk about John, so when I saw his picture with you, I went, I've got to bring this up. And once again, a great guy. You have to say one thing about our style of music is the people, 99.9% of the time, are just wonderful people,
Sure.
Except for me.
Except for you. Well, I haven't heard that, so it's all good.
When you were back in San Jose, you were playing in the band with Howard Miata.
Yeah, I met Howard Miata when I went to San Jose State University. I don't know if I met him at Marriott's Great America first, or if I met him in the hallway of the music department at San Jose State, but we ended up playing together in a couple different bands. Back in 1977, Howard Miata and I played at a Dixieland band at Marriott's Great America.
Right.
Bob Sequoy, you interviewed him recently. Bob Sequoy was a great guy.
Yeah.
And Gary Milliken and a few other guys. So yeah, Howard and I were playing there. And then we used to play together in a pep band for the basketball at San Jose State. I guess there was some rich patron who decided there needed to be a pep band for the basketball game. So once again, I got hired. I mean, the competition in the banjo world is not so stiff,
State especially.
So yeah, I played together with Howard Miata and Kent Mikasa and Ron Dieter and a whole bunch of other people who were all music majors from San Jose State.
And at least those three people you just mentioned, you guys all ended up with the Royal Jazz Society.
Yeah, I mean, that was the big popular band. I'm kind of kicking myself way back when I was the first banjo player for our SJO. I was, I didn't quite get it. I mean, I had only seen Scotty Plummer and Brad Roth and Eddie Peabody, and I just wanted to learn how to be a banjo soloist. And in a great band like RSJO, the role of the banjo player is to chunk chords a lot. And so I really wasn't into that. So I, talked to Don. I said, well, this is really not my thing. I'm not going to be the long-term banjoist here. So, but now, sheesh, I would love to be in a band like that and just sit back and relax.
I think all of us would love to be in any band at the moment. But
Sure.
I also see that you took lessons with Charlie Tagawa.
Yeah, Charlie Tagawa was my first banjo teacher way back when. I started, when I was 15, I was just about ready to turn 16. And I didn't know anything about tenor or plectrum or five-string, other than he was the conductor and musical director of the Peninsula Banjo Band. So, yeah, we called him up, signed up for lessons, and boy, I had a really junky tenor banjo. But I studied really hard. I mean, Charlie would give me a lesson thinking that, like most people, I'd come back the next week and have to go over it again. But I would practice a lot. And by the time a week would go by, I'd have the lesson down and come back and say, okay, what's next?
Well, what's what you did to plectrum?
Well, actually, I'll give the credit to Brad Roth, because I'd been playing about 9, 10, maybe 11 months when I went to the Banjo Jubilee show in San Jose. And out came Brad Roth. He was a young teen. And he was introduced by Richelieu, C.C. Richelieu, and now Brad Roth from Corvallis, Oregon. And out comes this little kid, and man, I couldn't believe it. He was on fire. Sparks were coming off of his banjo. And I was so impressed. And I had asked some people, how in the world can I play like that? And they said, well, first off, you got to get rid of your tenor banjo and get a plectrum. And I didn't even know the difference. But just the fact that Brad played plectrum and Scotty Plummer played plectrum, that was enough. I went home and tuned up my tenor banjo like a plectrum and started shopping to get a plectrum.
Ah, so you hadn't heard Harry Reese or any of those guys at the point then?
At that point, not really. They weren't. He wasn't really a big influence on me. I had heard of him, but it really didn't excite me like what I saw Scotty Plummer and Brad Roth do.
Yeah, well, not only were those guys, of course, those guys were Eddie Peabody devotees, and
Yes.
and talking about the ultimate showman, and making it look fun for the audience, you know.
Oh, definitely. And Scotty had a lot of that too. I remember seeing Scotty in probably November of 1973 in Sacramento, and I just couldn't believe it. It seemed like he was jumping up and down off of his chair, and the banjo was in the air. And I had never seen anybody do like that.
I don't know if he ever slid his stool across the stage and then ran and sat on it, though. That was an Eddie thing.
Yeah, that was Eddie. That was a pretty cool move, actually.
Scotty learned a little bit of the showmanship, of course, when he was Liberace's banjo player. And,
Yeah, that was pretty amazing.
oh, yeah,
He
absolutely.
played with Liberace for, I hear, 3 years, and it's surprising to me. I've looked so carefully. I cannot find any videos anywhere of those performances, and it just surprises me so much. I'd love to see it.
I think one of the banjo players who followed him in that gig was a guy named Carmen Mosier, who actually had a chance to play a lot with. And some of the stories are really interesting. But
Interesting, yeah.
well, nifty. Now you were talking about on your bio here about the first time you saw Renee Cammy's work and how you got involved with all that.
Who is that? I'm sorry.
Renee.
Oh, Renee. Yeah, Renee Carnes. Wow. Yeah, I think the first time I saw her, well, I used to hang out with her mentor, Henry Lee, in the late 70s. And boy, there's long stories there. But anyway, yeah, about 81, I went to a banjo show in San Jose, and I saw a huge crowd of people surrounding somebody, and I peeked over, and there was this young woman who I later learned was Renee, and she was showing people the first custom banjo that she made. And wow, everybody was so amazed. It was so beautiful. And, you know, after the crowd thinned out, I went up to her and asked her, well, I think I need one of those. How much is it going to cost? And when she told me, I thought, oh my God, I have to think about this for a couple of days. And I did. And then I decided to call her up and say, okay, let's do it. We need to build a Renee banjo for me. And she says, oh, you're too late. Bill Lowry just called me, and he ordered the number 2. So he got the number 2. I got the number 3. So I ended up receiving that banjo in 1985 and still have it today.
Wow. Yeah. Speaking of banjos and players, did you see that latest picture of Brad Roth of the new album possibility that they're doing?
Yeah, I can't wait. Please take my money. I just want it.
and he's not holding a box. I was flabbergasted.
I know. I was really surprised at that too. You know, a B&D Montana. Wow, Montana number 3. I mean, it's a great banjo. I've just never seen Brad play anything but a Vega box.
Absolutely, or a Gibson box when he had the sponsorship.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
about that banjo.
Brad recently posted a video of him playing the Montana,
Right.
just a demonstration video, and wow, fantastic. Of course, his playing is marvelous, and the banjo sounded great.
Yep, I know, but as a fan, as somebody, not only did I spend bit time in Banjo Mania with Brad, but we were 6 years together at Knott's Berry Farm, and we were, for years before that, with the Misbehaving Jazz Band in the same band. So we spent too many years together, and to see him holding a Paramount, or B&D rather, it was like,
I know. That was my first reaction too. I thought, wow, what in the world is going on there? Is the box broken or something? But he sounded great.
did you have a chance to actually to take some lessons from Frank Bowditch?
Well, I never really took any formal lessons from Frank. In fact, I don't think anybody really took formal lessons from Frank, but he was such a banjo fanatic, and he just loved to share what he knew. So he would just love to have people come over. And so Scotty Plummer used to do that. Brad Roth used to do that. And so, one time in the early 80s, I think I saw Frank at a banjo show, and I knew him to be Scotty and Brad's teacher, so I just couldn't help myself. I had to go introduce myself, and we became friends. And I used to go to his house a lot, probably every Friday night for many years. And he was just an abundance of stories. Eddie Peabody used to come to his house. He had a man cave downstairs filled with a dozen high-end banjos. And these were just the leftover ones after he had given away other ones to John McKinley up in Portland, Oregon. But yeah, Frank was a wonderful guy. Everybody that knows Frank just describes him as infinitely generous.
Wow. I had only recently seen a video of him playing, and I didn't realize what an absolutely tremendous tremolo he had. He had real speed in his right hand.
Yeah, he was a good player, and he was so willing to share what he knew. He knew Eddie Peabody's playing stroke for stroke, and so a lot of people went to him to learn that from him, and he was more than willing to share. I mean, he just loved his stories of Eddie being over his house and hanging out with his wife, Georgia, and his daughters, and he'd share pictures and old private recordings of Peabody playing with him, even playing piano while Frank played the banjo. So Frank just loved Eddie Peabody.
Very, very, very cool. So I need to ask the next question, which is what possessed you to become the musical director of the Peninsula Band?
Oh man, that was a kind of a bad decision. But back in those days, as always, anytime you get a group of people together, there's discord, and people aren't happy with things that are run. There's complaining, and at the time I was pretty young, and some of the people that didn't like the current musical director came to me hoping that I would take over the reins. And I was pretty naive back in those days, thinking, oh, maybe I could bring peace to the banjo continuum or something. So I said, sure, I'll put my name in the hat, and lo and behold, they voted me in. Hi, yeah.
How old were you then?
Well, that was in about 85, so 57, 67, 77. So somewhere around 28 years old, I was the musical director of the Peninsula Banjo Band.
I can't do adults.
Oh man. So I mean, I was only the musical director for 1 year, which was more than enough for me. And we did some really fun things. We learned a lot of new songs, and we improved songs. We had some good gigs. We went up to, we did some gigs up in Hillsboro at the Martin's house, and met Jimmy Stewart and Loretta Young and Audrey Meadows. And so it was a lot of fun. We almost went to the Carson show, but we were blocked by the union. But after a year of being the musical director, it's like herding cats. So I said, okay, enough of that.
Well, I was serious. I teach. I'm sure if you've watched interviews, you know too much about me already, because I just talk about myself all the time. My favorite subject. As a teacher of high school kids, I've tried teaching adults, or not even teaching, just trying to herd cats, like you said. And boy, opinions are already formed. There's not much you can do with a whole group of adults.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why banjo bands are like that, but oftentimes people are complaining that the keys in the wrong, songs in the wrong key, or who put you in charge of doing the intro, and I just don't enjoy that at all. I just love the banjo, everything about it, and I don't know why some people get a little grumpy.
Well, that's just human nature, actually, my friend. That's just human nature.
I guess so.
Let's talk about some of these groups you played at. Of course, you were at Marine World for a while.
Yeah, that was a very fun gig. I played at, first I played at Marriott, so that was a lot of fun. And then I think the years after that, I was at Marine World with Ron Dieter and Bruce Jolly on bass. And I think Manny was there on trumpet and a few other people. And It was a great gig. It was very relaxed. We'd stroll around, and I think we had a little stage we played near where people queued up for some ride. And then we'd walk around over into the lunch area and enjoy free food. And it was awesome. It was a great gig.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Bob Sequoia talks about the Marriott gig a lot. That he really enjoyed that time.
I was really surprised. I watched your interview with Bob Sequoia last week or the week before, and Bob sounded so humble, about his ability to improvise. And he was explaining that, the clarinet player Gary Milliken was giving him coaching. But wow, I remember back in '77 that Gary Milliken was telling me that Bob was a really good improviser and had incredible natural talent, which is what, springboarded him off into Las Vegas, I guess, following Larry Martin. And so I was surprised to hear that Bob was so humble about his improvisational ability.
Oh, Bob is just incredibly humble. Like I told you, when he and I met in the 10th Avenue Band, he actually asked me for a lesson. I had no idea that he had played in Vegas and he had this previous career.
Yeah.
And I was happy to oblige, but then years later when I talked to him or researching for this interview, I find out that he's been playing with all these top name bands and played in Las Vegas. And I said, and you asked me for a...
Very humble guy. But, thinking back to the Marine World gig, that was really fun because we also picked up a lot of extra gigs too. People would come up to us and say, wow, we really like your band. Can you come to our private party in our swanky high-rise condo in San Francisco? So we'd say, sure. We'd get paid pretty good money to be the little background music for high-end parties.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about Scarlett LaRousse.
Oh, Scarlett LaRousse, boy, that was a blast from the past. Back in the 70s and 60s, they'd have banjo bars that were just honky-tonks with piano and banjo and peanuts and fast music and lots of beer. And so Scarlett LaRousse was run by a guy named Bob Lasley, who previously ran a number of bars around the country, New Orleans and I think Chicago and other places. But he had Scarlett LaRousse in Los Gatos. And it was a little banjo bar, and every Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, there would be music there. And so I'd play there each week, and it would be like a pickup band. There'd be a piano and a couple horns and a banjo. And boy, lively audiences. Every table would be filled, and free peanuts and lots of drinks and fast music. So that was a wonderful experience for me, because I got to play each night from about 9 p.m. to 2 p.m., 2 a.m. close. So, a good 5 hours of playing, practicing, improvising, and playing with really good musicians. It was a great time.
For the audience that aren't banjoists or musicians in general, why don't you tell me a little bit about that transition from learning tunes for banjo bands and then all of a sudden getting stuck in a full-size Dixieland band or full-blown band? There's some differences in what songs they like to play.
Well, there's a huge repertoire of songs. Dixieland bands, they have their traditional things, and banjo bands have others. But a lot of these, banjo bars were all about sing-alongs. Everything had to be sung. And so there was Scarlett LaRousse and Los Gatos, and then there was a number of places in Tiburon. And boy, those were the days. I couldn't believe you'd walk into a place in Tiburon and there would be 300 people in the place, literally wall-to-wall people standing up, and a piano bar and banjo playing and bass, and everybody singing every song. It's like everybody knew every word to every song. And that's where all the young, hip, good-looking people were. They were in the banjo bars listening to the piano and banjos and just singing their hearts out.
Oh, was this all in the Bay Area when this was happening?
Yeah, I'm sure it was happening around the country, but my experience was mostly around the San Francisco Bay Area, Los Gatos, and then Tiburon was a big place where these banjo sing-along places, Mr. Q's and the Dock, and right on the main drag in Tiburon was a real hot spot of great sing-along banjo and piano music.
I'm not even sure we had what you would call a banjo club in Southern California at that time. There were shaky pizza parlors.
Yeah, we had Shakey's and Straw Hats. And then one of the very best banjo bands ever in the history of banjo bands was the Southern California Banjo Band. and the musical director was Ralph Martin.
Mhm.
And they had really good players down there. Their front line was amazing. Dick Martin and his brother John and Carol Fair and
By the way,
the sisters and Howard Alden was there. Oh, it was.
by the way, speaking of banjo players, towards the end of this month, I've got Cynthia Sayer coming on.
Oh, really? Cynthia Sayer, yeah, fantastic player. One of the world's best women players and fantastic player of any gender.
Well,
really good. She's done a lot in promoting the banjo, and she's a great performer and marketer of her banjo skills.
I think she was taken a little bit aback, but during our interview, I said to her, but I got to tell you, you must have one hell of an agent.
Yeah, I don't know if she's got an agent, but she does really well. I mean, she really associates with good high-end musicians, and she does a lot of gigs, does a lot of things, hangs out with really great people.
Oh yeah. And later on next month, I have Daniel Gibson coming on. But
very good.
But speaking, I'm trying to get more women on the show because of the heat I'm getting for being so male oriented.
Oh well, you're not doing it on purpose.
I are one. Oh, anyway.
One other idea might be Kathy Riley. Fred Finn or Mickey Finn's wife. She's a fantastic player and so personable.
I'm actually working on Molly Ryan.
Oh yeah, very good.
I'm hoping to get some other people, and it's just there aren't that many involved in the style of music, especially not the superstar grades. Although that's not what I'm after. I did interview Bonnie Otto.
Oh.
And she and I have a long history and kind of a wink type of relationship. And of course, Katie Kivera was
one of my very favorites.
Oh, she's just a good person to have around.
I've watched her for so long, on YouTube, and just love her playing. She's, great on banjo, guitar, and bass. And I just finally got to meet her face to face in February of this year. So I was really happy about that.
If you haven't seen our interview, I highly recommend it.
I did see that. Yeah, it was very good. She had come to Sacramento to play at the Jack Teagarden Jazz Festival. So I got a chance to see her. That was really nice.
Yeah, actually, one of the things that really brought you to my attention was that online banjo festival.
Oh yeah, that was really fun.
And seeing the people who were associated with that, and I would go through and look at the pictures on that post. It's okay, know him. I don't know him.
And that was really kind of surprising. I saw it come up. Came across the Facebook feed that the fellow from the Netherlands, Sjord, was going to do an online banjo festival with Sean Moises. And I thought, well, I don't know how that would really work. Well, I guess maybe I'll sit back and see how that works. And then I started seeing some real heavyweights join in, and Brad Roth signed up to do that. I thought, wow, okay, well, maybe this is going to have some legs. So I kind of heard about it last minute, so I put my tape together and sent it in, and I'm really glad that I did. It was a lot of fun. And I've just learned they're going to do another one of those in late January.
It was good for the viewers. I mean, to finally see that level of banjo players. In fact, that it's an international phenomenon, not just good old US of A.
Yeah, there are really good players around the world throughout Europe and Japan. Banjo is pretty big in Japan. You probably know that. I think you've traveled down there.
Yep.
But yeah, there's great players all over the place. It's not just a US-based instrument.
It's funny, and I've said this, I would say probably 90% of my interviews, that American classic jazz is more popular everywhere else in the world.
Yeah.
Than it is here. And
it's surprising. My friend Pat Dutro used to say this too. Pat Dutro, but he'd travel with some Dixie bands. Maybe you were in them. I don't know. No. Professor Holmes or Natural Gas, but he'd travel through Europe on these, Dixieland jazz tours. And he said the crowds were just intense. I mean, they were really appreciative. And I see the same thing in Japan. And now here in the U.S., you play a Dixie show, not so much enthusiasm, really. Sometimes yes, but not to the same level.
Yeah, I talked about when I was interviewing Tamás Istas of the Hungarian Bohem Band. I had mentioned that it was very strange for me to look out of the audience and sing the kids singing along to the lyrics of Ice Cream.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
High school and college age kids. I said, that would never happen, except maybe at Sacramento, or maybe
Yeah.
lakes where you have some kid jazz people there.
Yeah.
But
The Sea Monkeys or something. They've got the young kid groups in Sacramento. So, yeah, Sacramento's a great place for Dixie and jazz music. It's
it was.
wonderful to be back here for a bit.
We really need to get that Jubilee happening again.
Yeah.
It was kind of the pivot of the universe for us.
Definitely.
That's why that's where I met most of the people I've interviewed.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it's just a hotbed of great musicians and a lot of festivals and things. You know, they've been going on since, the 80s. We used to do really fun things, Dixie music festivals, 80s, 90s, 2000s. It's just been great.
Now, I've got to pick your brain a little bit about your banjo course.
Oh, banjo course, yeah.
And I'm toying with the idea of putting together a How to Play Dixieland tuba course.
Oh, that'd be great.
Well, I'm asked constantly by non-Dixie players, by classical tuba players, and adults who have only played, in community bands and things. How do you do that?
Ah, yeah.
And how did you approach putting it together?
Well, I've done this 2 times. I did it once in the 80s, and then I did it just this last year. And I just, first off, you just have to get motivated to do it. And I'd had a lot of people ask me about it. So I said, okay, well, sure, why not? And so I just bought myself a little tripod, and I got my camera, and I just got some lights, and I just sat down and just started teaching like I would normally do at a banjo workshop. And I just come up with topics. And so I ended up putting together about 48 different short videos on all the different playing aspects: left hand, right hand, single string, tremolos, chord forms, glissandos, all the different things. So it was almost like just teaching 48 private lessons.
Yeah.
And so each time I just finished recording it, I'd upload it to YouTube, and I'd get the link, and then I'd put it on a private page, which I did with Google Docs, and then send that out to the students. It was a great success and a lot of fun.
Yeah, where I kind of tend to go off the rails is because I was a teacher or within the school systems and privately, is my head just goes too deep into theory.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm trying to just stay focused on, I have to, first of all, I have to optimize who my audience is. If it's somebody who's never played anything, then I'm in trouble because my brain wants to teach that. Like, this is a treble clef, this is a bass clef, this is how it works.
Tuba may be different than banjo. There's a lot of people that play the banjo that really are not interested in reading music or understanding theory. And, you really can learn to play the banjo without all that.
Yeah, I'm just.
I know that because I love it.
I'm sure you've heard that some of the Jazz Society's tuba players who obviously aren't interested in learning the theory.
Oh, yeah. Those, they missed the lesson on getting the proper notes in the triad.
Anyway, I'm being a bit tongue-in-cheek here. So it says, once again, I'm looking at my notes, and I've seen my interviews, and I look disinterested at times, but in fact, I'm normally looking down at my notes, which is unfortunate. Talk a little bit about Dave Marty.
Dave Marty, yeah, I love Dave Marty. I think Dave is one of the best banjoists who has ever lived in the history of banjo. I first saw him back in the 70s, and boy, he just seemed like this mythical banjo god on stage. He was dressed to the T. He'd be wearing, tails and a bow tie, and he'd have all sorts of fancy pins on him, and he'd come out as a banjo soloist and just rock the crowd. I mean, he was an amazing player. And I always was so happy when he'd be performing on a show. And of course, I'd always be hand carrying my little cassette recorder. And over the years, we became good friends. I used to go out to watch him on his gigs in the 80s and the 90s. And sometimes he'd just bring me into his private gigs, and I just get to sit and watch him perform. And then here recently with the COVID lockdown, He doesn't have his gigs to do, and he's got a lot of free time, and I'm a huge fan. So I have been spending time with him, socially distanced and masked and that sort of thing. And he's been sharing with me a lot of his things. So I'm just thrilled to be able to have him not only as a friend, but a very good mentor.
It's nice to have that. And that's another thing you find in our style of music, not just banjos, but our styles in general, is that in some styles of music, the older players are very protective of their knowledge.
Yes.
And not wanting to give away secrets. I mean, famously, King Oliver with a handkerchief over his hand to try to keep people from stealing his licks.
Yeah, I think that's the case with the banjoist too. I know when Dave was younger, he was very protective of, he has special chords, right-hand strokes, really an amazing player. And he was somewhat protective of those in the early days. But, I think he's older now, and he's known me for a long time. He knows I'm just like a super fan. And plus also, I'm not really trying to usurp him. I'm not trying to be a big banjo soloist and get all the high-end performances and things. I just play banjo because I completely love it.
Now, you're a member of the Contemporary Four-String site, aren't you?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
There's another guy who I've spent forever with, which is Pat Deneen.
Pat Deneen, yeah, he's fantastic. I've followed his playing going all the way back to the 80s. And we've known each other. And yeah, I really admire his playing. And he was part of Banjo Mania at one point. He's done a lot of things. Very innovative player. He loves Pat Metheny. Loves to do things outside the box. So yeah, great guy.
There's actually an album that he's never released that I was on. I put two of his cuts on my musical website, but I'm still trying to talk him into it, and he just hasn't done the ASCAP and BMI certification of the tunes he wants to do.
Oh, that would be marvelous. I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, we've got to get him out there on my. Anyway, it's on my other YouTube channel, Daniel E. Zeilinger, two of the cuts that are public domain of that album. So
I think I've watched those.
Oh, well then, I'm sorry. Well, I mean, and so now you're going back and learning guitar and tenor again.
Well, yeah. So I started on tenor, played tenor for about a year, obviously switched to plectrum. But, now that I know more about plectrum, I'm looking at the tenor players and thinking, wow, I wouldn't mind being able to pick up a tenor and play a few songs like Harry Reeser. So I did pick up a tenor a few months ago, been working on some Reeser things. And guitar's a good thing. I've got a nice jazz guitar, and I haven't been making as much progress on that, but Pat Dutro and I decided we're going to start working together. He's a good guitarist. And so we'll probably be accountability buddies or something. So plus also I need something to practice at night when it's, too quiet outside. I can't be belting out on my banjo. I need to do a quiet guitar.
Maybe that's a duo we'll see at some upcoming festivals.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, Steve, this has been a gas. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
And I was wondering how the response would be to interviewing somebody who doesn't know me at all. Some people are very guarded. All you do is make a couple phone calls to friends, and they'll tell you that I'm crazy.
No worries. I'm honored that you asked. So I appreciate it very much.
Okay, thank you again, and I hope we get to meet in person again someday soon.
Hopefully, very soon.
All right, so you take care.
You too. Thanks.
Thank you for watching Trad Jazz Today. Dan shows new interviews every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Make sure to check out the archive of past shows, and please give us a thumbs up when you subscribe to the channel. Bye.